Gomooku is a traditional Chinese game played on a 19 by 19 board with black and white pieces placed on the intersections. Black moves first, and the object of the game is to place 5 pieces in a row horizontally, vertically, or diagonally before the opponent. Professional Gomooku players have stated that the game is solved. In particular, black is guaranteed to win with perfect play. We decided to investigate this game with both a traditional minimax algorithm and a threat-space search algorithm. The minimax algorithm is one of the most commonly used algorithms when designing board game artificial intelligences. This algorithm builds a tree of game states where each child is one move forward from each parent. It generally continues building this tree until a certain depth or it times out, then evaluates the resulting leaf nodes using a heuristic. Then, by assuming that players alternately minimize and maximize board values, we can arrive at a move that produces the maximum board value as defined by the heuristic. Unfortunately, this algorithm, while successful in other games like chess, is not well suited to Gomooku. This is because every board has on the order of 19 squared moves, and our game tree will have a huge branching factor. We'll not be able to investigate the tree to any meaningful depth. To vastly reduce the number of branches we consider, we begin by using threat-space search, which employs human strategies. In Gomooku, there's a concept of a threat, which is a sequence of pieces that forces the opponent to block at specific squares or risk losing within 2 moves. For example, in this scenario, if black moves to k9, white must respond with a move on h12 or l8. If white does not, black can play in one of these squares and form what is called a straight 4. At this point, there are 2 places black could go to win the game, but white can only block one of them. In Gomooku terminology, k9 is known as the gain square of the threat, h12 and l8 are known as the cost squares, and i11 and j10 are known as the rest squares. Threat-space search attempts use the concept of threat sequences and other game-specific human knowledge to make a more manageable game tree. When Gomooku masters play, they generally search for a sequence of threats that results either in a double threat or a straight 4. If they find such a sequence, they have won. However, sometimes a threat can be defended against by multiple moves. Professional players generally only consider threat sequences that are successful despite any variation in defensive moves. Accordingly, we only consider threat sequences that still work when the opponent can play all defensive moves available to them. Finally, in practical play, most winning threat sequences are just sequences of dependent threats, so we only consider such sequences. We thus build trees of dependent threats for every threat on the current board, and search for paths down the tree that result in a straight 4 or a double threat. Here is an example of a winning threat sequence. When black makes a move to i11, white must respond at i10. Black can then move to j10, forcing white to play on k11. Now when black plays on g13, it makes a straight 4. As you can see, after black made the initial move, white was forced to play defensively for the rest of the game and had no chance of winning. We wrote an implementation of threat-space search that attempts to find winning sequences in arbitrary boards. While it does not find all winning threat sequences, in particular it misses winning sequences that involve independent threats, it finds most of them and never returns false positives as other algorithms tend to do. Let's watch this in action. Here is a board that has a winning threat sequence. Watch as our AI finds this sequence and wins the game by sequentially playing the next moves. White is allowed to play all defensive moves for each new threat that is made, even if that involves making multiple moves in the same turn, but our AI still wins in the end. Okay, next we use this algorithm to implement an artificial intelligence that makes use of this threat-space search. However, many game boards do not contain winning sequences. Thus we implemented 2 other algorithms to complete our AI. First, if there is no winning threat sequence, the AI searches for what is called a hidden threat. Here is an example of a hidden threat. There are currently no winning threat sequences on the board. However, if black moves to k11 and white does not move in any of these places, then there's a winning threat sequence. If both of these approaches fail, then we use a modified minimax algorithm that aggressively prunes away branches at each level of the tree by using a heuristic to generate a move. This concludes our planned functionalities. We went beyond this to combine all of these algorithms to make a complete AI that starts with a minimax tree and then switches to threat-space search when it finds a winning threat sequence. This AI is able to play a complete game and even beat all of us in the game. Significantly, the minimax algorithm is much slower than threat-space search, and our project shows that when we use human logic, we are able to amplify the computational power of machines.